Hello, Happy New Year! I'm Paige Godfrey. Welcome to Slooh, a global community where we work together to learn to explore space. Tonight, we're welcoming 2018 by celebrating the second occurrence in a trilogy of supermoons that started in 2017 and is spanning this Happy New Year. We were here back on December 3rd, about 28-ish days ago, looking at the last supermoon of 2017. And now we're opening the new year with another one. And the final of our trilogy will be later this month, a blue moon finale, but we'll get to that a little bit later. To celebrate these special moons, we've been asking you to share your moon moments with us over the new year using the hashtag Supermoon Challenge. Maybe you're out under the moon tonight in the freezing cold. It's very frigid in the Northeast, if that's where you're from. That's where I'm doing this from now. So maybe you're outside, bundled up, super warm, marking this auspicious occasion with a bonfire to keep warm, or a ritual, or with friends or family. Perhaps this moment has inspired you to stay indoors and write a poem, or a song, or take a photo, or teach your kids about our planet's only natural satellite. Whatever it is, we'd love you to share with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook, and just hashtag Supermoon Challenge. We have a lot coming up over the next hour as we stream the supermoon tonight via our telescope feeds. Our storyteller, Helen Avery, will be sharing a little later some tales about this particular moon tonight and why opening the new year with a full moon is seen as particularly fortuitous. Then I'll be back to talk about the science behind a supermoon and give a teaser about our third full moon coming at the end of the month. On our discussion boards, you could see Slooh member Stephen A. pointed out that tonight's supermoon will be the largest full moon will appear in the night sky until the supermoon of November 2034. 16 years from now. So we challenge you to go outside and make sure you take a nice long look and soak up all of the light coming from this beautiful bright supermoon. So let's start by walking through our telescope feeds this evening. All of the feeds we're using are available for Slooh members to reserve, so you can check out other objects in the night sky like nebulae and planets, stars, galaxies by going over to our website at slooh.com. If you're not already there now, you can head there now, and you can be watching this at slooh.com, and you can find out how to join and book your own missions into space. So first up, we have our Canary Islands Observatory Ultra Wide Field Telescope, and we are looking live at tonight's supermoon. This big bright ball. You can see a lot of the highlands, which are the bright lines, and the lowlands, the lunar maria, or called the seas of the moon, are impact craters. Some of them have been filled in with volcanic lava, others not so much. But these are the different shades that you can see on the moon, and we have a really good image of it right now with how bright this moon is tonight. I was driving earlier today from my New Year's, and I was on the New Jersey Turnpike, and I looked right, I was going north, and so I looked just a little bit to my right, and the moon was huge. It almost actually thought to me for a second that it was the sun setting. It was this big, bright pink ball just peeking up over the horizon. We only started seeing half of it, and the sky behind it was like a light peachy pink, and then slowly, since it wasn't the sun setting and it wasn't moon rising, it started to rise in the sky. And probably about 20 minutes later, we saw the whole full moon up in the sky, and it turned like this golden yellow, and it was so bright, so bright. I tried to take a picture of it, but of course my measly iPhone camera didn't get me very far. So here we are with our live feeds so that you don't have to use your iPhone camera and you can look at our live feeds. And if you're on slooh.com, you can snap pictures from the live feed telescopes as well, especially if you're watching the show, you can snap pictures from there. We also have our Canary all-sky camera that shows us the moon from a much more zoomed out view. And it's actually so bright, this supermoon, that here we are, it looks like the sun. That is not the sun, everybody. That is the moon. But it is so bright that our all-sky camera takes in so much of this light, and it makes the sky look like it's daylight out. But that is our supermoon of 2018. And this moon, we keep referring to the supermoon and what's so super about it. And a little bit later, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty details about what makes it a supermoon. But basically, it is very different from another type of moon. And so we're going to push to all of our haters. Supermoons are super. When the full moon, which happens once a month, the moon orbits the Earth in an elliptical orbit. So it's not a circular orbit, and so its distance from Earth isn't always the same amount. So in an elliptical orbit, sometimes the moon is closer to Earth and sometimes it's further away. When a full moon occurs, when the moon is at its closest point to Earth in its elliptical orbit, we have a supermoon. When a full moon occurs when the moon is furthest away from the Earth in its elliptical orbit, we have what we call a mini moon. So you can see up on our screen now, we have a mini moon and a mega moon comparison. So this is the apparent brightness and size of the moon during these two occasions. Now, the moon is not actually changing in size, growing and shrinking, but because of its distance from Earth, it appears to be smaller and dimmer or larger and brighter. So on the left, we have the apogee mini moon. Apogee is the name for the point in an elliptical orbit when an object is the furthest away. So when the moon is the furthest from Earth, it's called apogee. And this is our mini moon when it's full. And then also when the moon is closest to the Earth in its elliptical orbit, that's called perigee. And we have a supermoon when it's a full moon. This also works when we have a new moon. It's the same thing. So a new moon is also super or mini based on where the moon is in orbit. But of course, we don't see the new moon because the sun is shining on the other side of the moon. So it's not really that special, and we don't do these live performances because you won't be able to see anything. So we are focusing on full moons here, but this is the brightness and size comparison, and it really is spectacular. It might, on a daily basis, it might not seem like so much, especially we do have full moons once a month, but when you really look at these size comparisons one next to each other, you can see just how influential it is. And I have to say that the supermoon tonight is spectacular. If you haven't gotten a chance, we will give you a break in a few minutes and you can step outside and take a look if you can't see through your windows. It really is a beautiful moon tonight to ring in the new year. The supermoon also does some other effects on us on Earth. We have our ocean tides, which are affected by the moon. The gravitational pull from the moon is what gives us high and low tide. And during a supermoon, when the moon is closest to the Earth, the tides are more heavily impacted than when the moon is further away. And that makes sense because when the moon is closer, its gravitational attraction is stronger. So things on Earth, natural phenomena like tides and earthquakes, really are affected by where the moon is in its orbit. And so sometimes, we say that full moons can cause weird occurrences on Earth with nature, with animals, and supermoons are no less. And in fact, they are even more so. And that leads us nicely into bringing up our storyteller, Helen Avery, because she's going to talk less about the natural phenomena and more about the earthly behaviors that are also altered on the eve of a supermoon. So we'll bring Helen Avery on, and she can tell us about this full moon's significance on culture and human spirit. Hi, Helen. Happy New Year. I think you're muted, Helen.
I know.
There you go.
I'll get this.
We love your earrings. You're always on the earring game.
I got this for
Very
Christmas.
nice.
I really see it. My moon.
Love it.
From...
How perfect.
Yeah. So it looks pretty nice there tonight.
Do you have a good view outside at your home too?
I do. I just stepped out. I do a ritual every full moon. So I walked outside and lit some sage, and now I'm kind of blinded by that. I'm not a very good witch or pagan, to be fair, but I do give it a go, and it looks amazing. It's really, really bright. We've got a really clear sky today. So in the middle of Brooklyn, New York, that's pretty rare, I would say. So really lucky.
Yeah.
That's it. And for the last supermoon in December, it was also like crazy bright night and clear night. So it's great. Been very lucky.
I'm very impressed that you went outside in these freezing temperatures to do your ritual. That's dedication to a supermoon.
Right. Wow, you have to do it. So yeah, I guess I thought maybe tonight we'd just have a bit of a talk about some people are sort of saying, what does it mean that we've got this new this supermoon on the first day of New Year? And there, as you pointed out earlier, it looks like as bright as the sun. But one of the things that I thought we could talk about, or I wanted to share with you, people, was this idea of, it's New Year to us, but actually, way back thousands and thousands of years ago, it wasn't a New Year at all, because people had the lunar calendar. Um, so essentially, the there are 13 moons in an entire cycle. Uh, and there's this beautiful moon now, right now. 13 moons in the entire cycle, and the cycle was never ending. So there was never a new moon. A new year, and sort of as we sort of move to a solar calendar as early as the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians before them, actually, started this introduction of something like a new year. Sometimes it'd be spring equinox, sometimes it'd be the solstice, sometimes it'd be the winter solstice. Kind of, it was sort of factored around the sun, so it's the sun being reborn after the winter solstice, or the sun at the highest point of the sky, that kind of thing. But before that, there wasn't really a new year. People just sort of moved according to the moon, and we've kind of forgotten that, especially as we have this sort of Gregorian calendar, and before that it was the Julian calendar, where the year for us in the West, at least, starts on the first. Not everywhere, of course. The Chinese New Year is different, the Hebrew calendar is different. But we're sort of out of touch with the fact that there's this beautiful cycle of moons. So although some people are wanting to say, isn't it amazing we've got this full moon beginning of a new year? Well, it doesn't really mean anything if we sort of get back to our roots. It just would have been another moon in the cycle, and no moon was any better than any other moon. So no one would have dared to say that a new moon, there was a moon that sort of started the whole year. So what happened was, because obviously this 13 moons wasn't quite the 365 days, that every few years, and this is, I'm talking really about the Druids and the Celts, because we know a lot about what they did a couple of thousand years ago, is that they would repeat a moon to sort of get them back on track. So every few years, the elders and the wise women would come together and say, which moon shall we repeat this year? And they sort of intuit as the year went on. So if there was a really big harvest, for example, that had to happen over 2 moons, the harvesting of the crops, they would just add in a second harvest moon. Or if there was a particularly bad winter, they would just add in a second ice moon, for example, to sort of bump them up for that year and then carry on as normal. But I know we're talking about the sort of Supermoon challenge, and we're sort of putting to people that maybe they can, have a resolution this year to go and enjoy every full moon. Just sort of encourage people to step outside. I know I was looking at Facebook, and a bunch of people got telescopes for Christmas, or still trying to figure out how to use their telescope they got last Christmas. But one of the great things about the full moon is you can just step outside, and if you've got a clear night, you can see, you can even see it just through binoculars. This kind of detail. But as I was thinking about this sort of cycle of our moons, what does it mean for this sort of new year that we're celebrating? We've got this super moon. There are a couple of things that I found sort of interesting. One was, how out of touch we are, as I mentioned, with this 13 moon cycle, and that's not entirely our fault, because what happened was when, and I always feel like I'm blaming religion, but when sort of the world's religions as we know them right now really started taking off a couple of thousand years ago, what happened was they kind of wanted people to step away from the sort of ways of worshipping before, and there was a lot of moon worship, because the moon, with its 13 moons, this cycle, was deemed to be sort of the goddess of time, and before that the god of time, sort of a bit of a mix on god and goddess with the moons. But they wanted people to step away from that and sort of step in to this idea of religion, this 12-month cycle of the calendar. So, I would guess we call it propaganda today. They put out like the message that 13 was like the number of the devil. It was like an evil number, and we still have that today in the West. We think 13 is like an unlucky number, but actually 13 is just the cycle of our moons, and that's where it came from. So I felt like, even just thinking about that puts us sort of a little bit back in touch with the moon, and maybe inspires us to go outside and have a look and realize that the moon isn't that 13 isn't unlucky, and when it's, in fact, it's amazingly lucky because we get 13 moons in a cycle. And one of the sort of tying in this to the new year and the fact that it's a super moon, just looking at the moon right now, that we always say, like, ancient peoples had this sort of worship the moon and had this cycle of 13, but actually indigenous cultures today, and people who not even are sort of indigenous cultures, but just sort of like earth religions or in touch with earth cycles, still adhere to this 13 moon cycle. And the Abenaki peoples of North America, sort of kind of Northeast America, this particular moon, coincidentally, is called the big moon. Every year, the moon that falls at this time is called the big moon. And in some, for some native peoples in North America, it's called the big spirit moon. And the one before it, the last super moon we would have had, was the little spirit moon. And it's seen as a moon of great creation. So I thought this tied in sort of really well for like the first day of the year. It's the big spirit moon is this time where anything can happen, and actually it's believed that over the next 3 months, everything that you sort of put into motion at the time of this moon will sort of receive like an extra boost and come to pass, that you're really in touch with sort of the universe or the divine or God or great mother or whatever it is you want to call it. So a really sort of auspicious moon, if you think about that kind of energy coupling with the new year. And then the other thing I was sort of, thinking about with this moon and the new year, and some people are saying, "Oh, so what? It's just another moon. It just happens to be a new year." Yeah, it does fall on New Year's Day. It's actually quite rare, and we won't have a moon this size again for quite some time. And I don't know about you, but even if you're like not into myth or superstition, that kind of thing, I think everyone's a little, imagination starts to go when you have the end of last year is a supermoon, the very first day of this year is a supermoon, and we have another supermoon this month, like a blue supermoon that Dr. Paige Godfrey is going to be talking about a bit later. It does kind of get the imagination going. So full moons have been celebrated by people throughout history because they're seen as bringing like a special power. And as I mentioned, the moon was seen as really, really important because it governed time. And interestingly, back in those days, and for those people, the sun wasn't that important. The sun was sort of, it looked the same, unless it was an eclipse, which terrified people. That's why they were terrified, because the sun always looked the same. It sort of came every day, but the moon changed. It seemed to follow the sort of cycle that we have of birth and then life and then death and then renewal. And then we're just looking at the difference between a supermoon and a regular moon. So as I mentioned, and then there's these 13 moons, and then the seasons repeat themselves. So the moon was really seen as what was important, and the sun, as I say, was kind of an aside, which is interesting today when we're all about the sun, and the moon is just, it's there, it's our satellite, and we've been to it. And some people say, well, we've been to it, why go again? It wasn't very interesting when we got there. We would probably disagree here at Slooh. I'd say it's really interesting. But as I say, back then the moon was really important, and then it sort of shifted to more of we're more fascinated by the sun, which in itself is very interesting, because you kind of think maybe in 2,000 years people will be talking about us and saying, at that period it was a great sun cult, and then prior to them was a moon cult. And who knows what would be in 2,000 years? Who knows if it'll even be the Gregorian calendar, or maybe we'll go back to a lunar cycle. But back, as I say, when the moon was really seen as being like the governor of time, really just like the goddess of everything, almost sort of the creator embodied, people believed that in a full moon, the energy was at a peak. It had been growing since the new moon, and now it's a full. And we could tap into this lunar energy through ritual, as I sort of mentioned my sort of half-hearted attempt at a ritual earlier, just lighting a candle and burning some sage and sending a message up. But people did very elaborate rituals, fire rituals, sacrificial rituals sometimes. Don't do those now, thank goodness. But and then what was, it seems, it was the time when if you were going to ask your boss for a pay rise, it would be on the full moon, or if you were going to get that novel published, it was going to be now, or you're going to ask that person to marry you, it would be on the full moon, because you've got this energy of really the god or goddess of creation in the sky that you can sort of tune into. That's what it was seen as. And then what was seen was that the moon, as it does, appears to wane. So it was seen that this beautiful body of energy, this lunar energy, was like letting go of something to sort of be reborn again later down the line and then grow again. So the full moon was seen as a period in which to let go, and you'll get where I'm going in a minute, hopefully. But I was thinking that how perfect for a new year, because we make lots of resolutions on New Year's Day. And many of them are things like letting go of old habits. For example, maybe you want to let go of, I'm trying to think of my own, like eating too much sugar or drinking too much wine, or whatever it is that you're trying to let go of, these old habits. Or perhaps we often in resolutions are like, we're going to be kinder to people this year, in which case we're letting go of resentments or anger or judgments of other people. So actually, if we sort of tie in this way that the ancient people and some people today, as say sort of pagans, but also yogis, for example, Buddhists also, view the full moon as a wonderful period where the moon's energy is supporting you over the next 14 days of letting go of something. So I thought, how perfect, actually, how auspicious for New Year's Day, that if you are a believer in this kind of thing, or even if you're not, you could do an experiment to see if it works. That you could write down all the things you want to let go of as you're writing down your resolutions, and then put it outside under the moon, even if it's under cloud. It doesn't matter on a ritual. It doesn't matter. The energy is all around us. Light a candle or whatever it is that is meaningful for you. Maybe say a few words, offer a poem, have a toast, and just see. Maybe your New Year's resolutions will be easier to keep this year, as we've sort of started the year with this wonderful supermoon. So, and it's sort of said that when it's a supermoon, people didn't know back in the day that it was the same size moon. But they believed it has a lot more energy with it, so it was like a supercharged time to do a ritual. So we're very blessed, I think, to have a super full moon to start this year, and hopefully it means wonderful things. But we are almost upon exact full moon time, which is at 9:25 Eastern. So maybe this is a wonderful time to bring Dr. Paige Godfrey back. Hi.
So I did the same thing and had my microphone muted.
Okay,
New Day, everybody.
It's the moon.
So now we're probably only about 30 seconds out from the it's the full moon. It's getting me. It's also getting my cat that is outside my office door screaming to be let in and pet. So we are really close to the moment of the exact full moon. That's really exciting. We have beautiful views through these scopes still. I can't get over it. It almost to me looks like a cartoon or a drawing. The contrast, the background is so dark and the moon is so bright. It looks like it's not even real.
Yeah, it looks like it's about to pop out, like a 3D pop out.
Yeah.
And it just I feel like we should have a countdown like you do for New Year for our full moon moment.
Yeah. 10, 9. My watch says we're in 9:25 now, so I think we've missed our countdown. But happy
Oh,
full moon year.
full moon. Happy supermoon.
Happy supermoon. I'm going to start that hashtag trending on social media. Happy supermoon, everybody. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what exactly is a supermoon. But just before we get to that, I want to kind of tap onto Helen's awesome stories about resolutions and rituals. And we here at Slooh have some really exciting news to share that you might have seen going around our social media and our website recently. But it definitely leads us into what our resolution is going to be going into 2018. So if you haven't heard, or even if you did and you want to clap for us again, we're really excited to announce that we won the National Science Foundation Small Business Innovative Research Grant. It is a phase 1 out of 2 phase grant. And we worked really hard to apply for this grant. We applied back in June, and we just found out just last week that we won. So we are really looking forward to 2018 and all of the hard work that that's going to bring, but it's going to be so rewarding. The proposal is for our gamification of space curricula. So currently, Slooh is capable of being put into classrooms, and maybe if you're listening, maybe you're a teacher or a parent that does use Slooh to educate children currently, and if so, great, and we would love to have your feedback as we go into this new embarkation. But our proposal was to gamify the experience and to create quests and just a kind of like immersive gaming experience to help educate with space. And we're really looking forward to just jumping 2 feet forward into the ball pit that is this space gamification. And so I think our Slooh resolution for 2018 is to work hard and prosper. I think that's what I'm going to call it. So thank you, Helen, for leading us into that nice resolutions and rituals. And I think we will all be able to kind of take some time tonight to just look up and be appreciative for the things that we have going into 2018. So we have now, we're looking through our Canary Islands all sky cam. And so you can see what I mentioned earlier kind of looks like the sun, but it is not. It is the full bright supermoon. It's just so bright that it's lighting up the sky in the Canary Islands almost as if it was daylight when you look through the telescopes. It's not actually daylight out there, but the telescope takes in all this light from the moon and it makes it appear that it's daylight. And right now, you're looking at the all-sky camera from our southern observatory in Chile. So unfortunately, we are clouded out, as you can see through this all-sky camera. You can kind of see around the edge, like the domes and some land, and then smack dab in the middle is this big gray blob. Those are clouds. And unfortunately, those are why we don't have live feeds of the supermoon tonight from Chile. But we do have telescopes in Chile and Canary Islands, so we cover the northern and southern hemispheres. So if you're new to Slooh and you're interested in joining our team and using our telescopes to reserve missions to observe things on a daily basis, we do have this telescope up and running. And typically, at this time of year, it's a great scope to have up and running because if you're familiar with northern weather right now, the Canary Islands just experience a lot of it. And so Chile is a great southern hemisphere observatory for us. But we will focus on the Canary Islands observatories tonight because that's where we do have beautiful clear skies, bright supermoons, a lot of supermoons. That's not plural. Supermoon. One moon. Unfortunately, we only have one moon here on Earth. So fun fact, a lot of other planets in our solar system have a ton of moons, and we have one, but that's okay because Mercury and Venus don't have any moons, and so at least we have one. That's what I figure. And if you want to hear more about that, I'll just plug that you can listen to my Intro to Astronomy course on Wednesday nights, and I talk a lot about the moons of our solar system and things like that. So here we are back at our Canary Islands ultra wide field telescope looking at the supermoon. You can see a ton of detail. We have the highlands, which are the bright colored regions, and the lowlands, or the lunar maria, which are the dark colored regions. Those are impact craters. One of the things, actually, I'm just going to mention that a question we've been getting a lot recently with this supermoon is how come the far side of the moon appears to have, which when we talk about the near side and the far side, we're referring to the fact that the moon is tidally locked to Earth, so we only ever see one face of the moon. The whole moon does get sunlight. It's just that we only ever see the one side because that's all that's facing us. So the far side of the moon, which is commonly referred to as the dark side of the moon, it's not actually dark. It does get sunlight shining on it, but we don't see it. So it's dark to us. But we have been around there with telescopes, and astronauts have been around the backside of the moon. And so the question is, why are there more impact craters on the backside of the moon than on the front? And the answer is not that Earth protects the moon, actually. We do not really stand in the way of anything that would be hitting the moon. That would be very slim chances, which I guess is kind of good for us because we wouldn't want it to hit us instead. But what's actually happening is that the near side of the moon, the side closest to Earth, has a thinner crust, which has allowed volcanic activity to be more frequent in its history. So after impact craters occurred, the thin crust allowed volcanoes to erupt more, and the lava filled in the craters, which makes it appear like there were less impacts. So that's the answer. We actually had, I think that question was on Instagram. And so that is another question. If you ever have questions for us, especially when you know we have a live cast coming up, feel free to post on our discussion boards. We always get right back to you. We do our best. You can also comment to us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. But so let's talk about another big question, probably the biggest question we get around a live cast like this. What is a supermoon, and why is it so super? And why do astronomers like Neil Tyson on Twitter tell people that it's not super, it's not anything interesting? Well, we are here to argue that we like to talk about all things space. And so whether it's just a plain old boring full moon or a really awesome supermoon, it's all interesting to us. And as you heard Helen Avery tell, there's so many rituals and stories and human culture and art and just so many things that make people go outside, whether it's the science or it's the human connection. And we're here to celebrate all of it. So if this supermoon is super to you, then we are here to share that with you. I also think that I personally have a heart for education and outreach. And so I think that it's important to go along with anything that will get people interested. If the media is going to hype it, I am not going to fight it. I'm going to take the opportunity to share cool space things, to get the facts out there. We don't have to say that supermoons aren't super. We just need to be honest about what a supermoon is. And I think that's super enough. So, okay, what is a supermoon? Well, I mentioned earlier, it's a full moon that coincides with the perigee, which is the time in the moon's orbit around the Earth that the moon is closest to the Earth. So the moon orbits Earth in an elliptical shape. So it's not a circular orbit, it's an elliptical orbit. And so if the sun is in the Earth, if the Earth is in the center here, and the moon is orbiting in this ellipse, then at some points it's furthest away from the Earth, and at other points it's closest to the Earth. And the furthest away point is called apogee, and the closest point is called perigee. So when the moon is closest to the Earth at perigee, and it's a full moon, we call this a supermoon. And if you were with us just a few minutes ago, we were together, me and Helen, when it was the exact moment of the supermoon tonight. So when the full moon exactly hit the closest point that it's going to hit to the Earth. Because, of course, the moon is constantly moving. And so a supermoon, we say it's the whole night, but really there is only one point where it's exactly as close as it is going to get. And if you're looking at our screen now, you can see a comparison of the large apparent size of a supermoon versus the smaller apparent size of a mini moon, or a full moon that occurs at apogee when the moon is furthest away from the Earth in its orbit. So this isn't the moon actually growing, but this is what the apparent size and brightness looks like. And this image earlier, I was going on about how the apparent size is so drastically different, but actually this image also really shows how the apparent brightness is different. You can see on the mini moon, it's a much darker gray. Some of the lowlands are a little bit more detailed. And on the mega moon, the big supermoon on the right-hand side, I think personally that the highlands are a little bit more detailed, and it's a much brighter full moon. So the moon is actually about apparent size. Remember, apparent brightness and size. It's going to be about 30% brighter when it's a supermoon than when it's just a regular, typical full moon. And it's going to be about 14% bigger in apparent size than a typical full moon when it's a supermoon. So if you look outside tonight versus the next, well, I guess this is leading me into the third supermoon of the trilogy. I was going to say if you're outside for the next just full moon, but actually the next full moon is a big deal, but we'll talk about that later. But so the next full moon, this moon tonight is going to appear about 30% brighter and about 14% bigger. That's the typical average for how big and bright a moon looks when it's a supermoon. So all of this about the orbit, okay, so we understand that the moon is closest to the Earth, and so that's why it appears bigger and brighter. But what does it matter if it's a full moon, and where does a full moon come from? The moon has phases, and the phase calendar is about 29 and a half days for the moon to go through a full cycle. The moon takes 27 and a half days to orbit the Earth, which is why I mentioned earlier there was the tidal locking of the moon to the Earth, because the moon orbits the Earth every 27 and a half days and goes through the lunar phase cycle every 29 and a half days. We never see the other side of the moon, which is why we call it the dark side of the moon, but the other side does see sunlight. And so what's happening is based on the configuration of the Earth, moon, and the sun, where the sun is shining on the moon, and then where we are compared to that sunlight or the shadow gives us our lunar phase cycle. So sometimes we have a new moon where the sun is fully shining on the side of the moon that doesn't face us, so we don't see anything. Sometimes the sun is shining, say, on like the side of the moon, so we only see half of it being illuminated. And then other times, like tonight, when we have a full moon, the sun is shining, say that 5 times fast, fully on the face of the moon that is facing us. And so we have what appears to us to be a full moon. And the line in between, so we don't have a line tonight that we can see visibly, but the line in between the sunlight and the shadow on the moon is called the terminator line. So a full moon is when the moon is opposite the sun in our night sky, so the entire half that faces us is fully illuminated. A new moon occurs when the moon is between us and the sun, so that the half that is illuminated is facing the sun, not facing us. So technically, a new moon at perigee is also called a supermoon, but since the dark side is facing us, or the sun is shining on the other side that's not facing us, we can't see its superness, superiority. When the moon is full during its perigee, it appears to be larger than normal. Again, this is just apparent. It's not actually any larger, but it can be up to about 14% larger in our sky and about 30% brighter. And I have to say, based on what I saw earlier today as the moon was rising, it really does. It almost probably even looks more so than that, so much brighter and bigger. It was a beautiful moon. And so I think that's super enough for me. It's enough for me to call it a supermoon anyway. But I guess I've already hinted twice now to the third supermoon in the trilogy, so I will stop and talk about that. On the 31st of this month, January 31st, we're going to be back again to watch the third supermoon that closes out the 2018 trilogy. So NASA has coined this Supermoon Trilogy term because we've had 3 supermoons all in a row. So back in December, we had one, we have one tonight, and then we'll have one again at the end of the month. So 3 full moons in a row have been supermoons. So we have a Supermoon Trilogy. And what makes an epic grand finale of this trilogy is that the next supermoon is a super blue blood moon. It's a lot. So what is all that? A blue moon is when 2 full moons occur in the same calendar month. So typically, we have 1 full moon a month. And a lot of these full moons have names, like you might have heard of the June strawberry moon, or the harvest moon, or the one tonight is the wolf moon. These names come from history, from Native Americans naming the moons based on naming the full moons based on their seasons and what was going on for them. So, for example, the June strawberry moon is named so not because it's pink, but because that was a good season for harvesting strawberries. And that's how they used the moon in their daily lives. So when we have 2 full moons that occur in one month, such as tonight and January 31st, the second one is called a blue moon. Now, it might not necessarily appear blue. On occasion, the moon can appear blue. This all has to do with the amount of sunlight that's being refracted, shining on it, et cetera, through our atmosphere. But it's called a blue moon when it's the second full moon in a month. So that's happening. The moon is going to be a supermoon because it's going to be a full moon that occurs when the moon is at perigee in its orbit. So we have those two things. And it's also going to be a blood moon because it is a total lunar eclipse. I am so excited. So the lunar eclipse, the moon, when it enters into the shadow of the earth, so the sun and then the earth and then the moon is going to go behind the earth into its shadow that is being cast from the sun shining on the earth. And so as the moon enters into, there's two versions of the shadow. There's the wider shadow called the penumbra, and then the more tight shadow called the umbra. And when it enters through the penumbra into the umbra shadow, it can appear red. The moon can actually turn like a blood red color, and so it's called a blood moon. So keep an eye out for that if you're in an area where you can see the total lunar eclipse. We will be live for that show as well. But I think that's a really awesome way to close out the Supermoon Trilogy, is not just with another supermoon, but with a blue blood supermoon total lunar eclipse. There's a lot of names going on in there. But these supermoons have been really incredible. The December 3rd one was super bright. Tonight is the brightest supermoon until 2034. And then the third supermoon in the trilogy is this crazy mashup of names for a fancy blue red moon. And that total eclipse is going to last, the full total eclipse is going to last just a little bit over an hour, but the whole eclipse duration, where the moon is actually moving through the shadow, is going to last over 5 hours. So you have a really good shot of seeing it if you're up around that hour on January 31st. And we'll be showing our live feeds. So come back in a month and see us there. The lunar eclipse that's occurring at the end of the month is the first one since 2015, and the next one is not going to be until the summer, actually. So we don't have to wait another 3 years, but just 6 more months. So you should check this one out now instead of waiting until summer. So I think it's time we wrapped up a little bit. We can keep looking at our live feeds. This is the Canary Islands Observatory, the ultra wide field telescope, and we have a beautiful view of the moon. I was reading earlier, what's interesting about this supermoon is that there aren't any planets that are in view right now. So, here's our all-sky camera. Again, that's the moon, not the sun. But you can see over towards the left of the camera our horizon, and this is the opening of the dome. And if you look all the way to the left, you can see a couple open domes of our telescopes, and you can see that in the closest dome to us, you can see the telescope pointing out at the moon. It's pretty neat. We just recently shared a video of our domes opening, and I thought that was the coolest thing. You can find that on our Twitter and our Instagram, because I shared it to both because I was so excited. It was one of Paul Cox's shows, and he showed us the dome opening all the way, and it was really neat. But the domes open so wide, they let in all this moonshine, and that's what makes the sky appear to be so bright through our all-sky cameras. But if you are on Slooh.com, you can snap pictures of the bright supermoon through our telescope feeds. This is the picture you can get right here. I've already gotten my picture, so I hope you go get yours. And you can share any of your moon pictures with us, or any of your literature or art, or any of your family and friend moments, anything that strikes you as special on this New Year's Day supermoon, with the hashtag Supermoon Challenge. And I'm going to start another one, hashtag Happy Supermoon, at our social media. So go over to our Slooh Twitter or our Instagram and share hashtag Supermoon Challenge with whatever strikes you as magical tonight for this lunar luck that we have in this Supermoon Trilogy. I think it's about time we wrapped up, but we have some more things coming up in the next couple weeks. So we want you to join us at Slooh.com. On this Wednesday, the 3rd, I'm going to be giving the 6th session of my Intro to Astronomy course. This week is on stellar evolution. So you might be interested to hear about the violent deaths of stars, or if you prefer, the beautiful planetary nebulae that form out of the magical passing of a star. You can twist that however you want, but either way, I will describe what happens, and so you can join us with what your opinion is on that. On Sunday, the 7th, we will hear again from Helen Avery sharing Tales of Orion. And if you're wondering how exactly to use our telescopes and to take advantage of our live feeds like we have tonight, you'll want to tune in to sessions led by Slooh astronomer Paul Cox, who takes us step by step on how to be fluent in Slooh space navigation with his practical astronomy courses. You can also contact us on the discussion boards, post your questions, post your pictures, share stories, share mosaics that you've made. If you have a really great supermoon photo from today, we'd love to see it there. We'll share it around as well. If you've enjoyed our show tonight, we welcome you to join Slooh as an apprentice or astronomer member, where you can learn to explore space by following our new courses and control our lineup of mighty telescopes. Your membership is an affirmation to us of our 14-year mission to teach the world to explore space. We welcome you to become part of the Slooh community. We explore and learn about space together every single night. And if you were listening just a little bit ago, we mentioned our big news about winning a National Science Foundation Small Business Innovative Research Grant. We're really excited to start 2018 and embark on this new journey that's going to help us to better our program and help better your education of space. So we really look forward to working with you in 2018 and making this the best super moonish year yet. Thank you for joining us tonight. Now we want you to go outside and see for yourself the largest supermoon of the brand new year. Good night, all. Happy New Year. Happy moon watching. Happy supermoon.